Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. For a thorough conversation on how Tire Tag can help your agency in revenue collection, visit episode 204. That's 204. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
You really are avoiding, you're avoiding doing exactly what you're saying because you're doing the quote hard things that you see David Goggins and all those guys talking about. It's like you're missing the point. Yeah.
Your orientation real quick, because I do believe in cold plunge, red light,
sauna. Absolutely. Yeah.
But if your intention is to take a video and tell your buddies that I did 6 minutes at 40 degrees and you're a bitch, I challenge you to do more. That's still ego and external validation. And that's not what, quote, the second half of life is about.
Yeah.
But what if I'm doing the cold plunge to knowing that it's going to calm down my parasympathetic nervous system and allow me to have a better yin yoga or a therapy session later that day or a difficult conversation with my partner. And if you guys aren't familiar with Gottman, I'm going to give my woman a 6-second kiss, even when I'm pissed at her and she's like, nah, 6-second kiss or 20-second hug. Yeah, those are the harder things. And do the biohacking to calm down your nervous system. Don't do it to show anybody how tough you are. That's kind of the difference, I hope, that people can see or that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's like a biohack or let's recover so hard, right? But really, it could be just little doses or just don't do it, and that's your recovery. And that's what I'm trying to, I'll say I'm doing better, right? Finding that peace in the morning. I usually get up before the family, but it used to be lifting and then writing and then podcast editing, right? So it's very active, productive, but a different kind of productive, which is listening to my body, kind of taking a temperature check. It's usually more something like reading or listening to music, right? Music is a big, I love music, but there's so much time that you got to use, or so little time you got to be productive and learn something. It's no, I'm just listening to music. I'm just listening to some hip hop or some classical or something, just kind of letting that restore me in a different way. I'm sitting in the hot tub, right? It's still dark out. It's very recuperative. It's very relaxing. I feel the early morning air. That's awesome stuff. I feel very privileged to be able to do that kind of stuff. But sometimes my body is not wanting to lift weights. I didn't sleep that well. So I'm going to do these kind of things. So I think that's I'll label it as my own personal maturity to recognize that. And then later in the day when I've had some food, maybe that's a better time to work out. But maybe that looks different, right? And I've talked about that on the show where it used to be, regardless, 5 hours of sleep, I'm lifting heavy, I'm doing sneak circuit stuff. It's not that way for me anymore. If that's for you, maybe, but it does not work for me. It starts getting these deficits. And it's a little bit of we brought up earlier, this archetype thing, right? We want to be warriors. We want to be hard chargers. We want to be go, go, go. But sometimes you got to do the other things. And as cops, we're not just warriors. There's a time, and I know that this is a very controversial thing, but no, there are times where we need to bring that warrior spirit and energy in a really positive, protective way. There's other times where guardian might make more sense, and it might just be muddy word choice. But there's also times when you're a teacher or mentor. you're a coach, you're a caretaker, right? You are just a helper. And sometimes those overarch because we should be all those things, right? We should absolutely be all those things to do this job, public service.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I've had rookies that I've had the same conversation with. Some really identify with the warrior archetype, and you can tell they want to be future SWAT guys, and others just want to be social workers. So they don't like the warrior term. And I actually had one female that I trained that said, "Yeah, term warrior is stupid. I think it's stupid that cops are called warriors." And I just said, you know what? Like warriors, guardians, I go, it's all kind of irrelevant. Like we're just cops, man. Like what we do is different than anything else. We're just fucking cops. So like whatever that term means for you, there's sometimes you got to kick people's asses, and sometimes you got to tell people like, hey, maybe you should go, visit a chapel and drive them to church. Sometimes that's appropriate. It's a very weird profession. You have to be blue collar and hardcore, but you also have to be white collar and know how to write. Like the dichotomy of how to be a good cop is really insane when you start looking at it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
One thing that just popped in my mind is that people out there want to kind of like, hey, well, I don't understand this. This is too deep. Carol Pearson has a workbook called What Story Are You Living? Carol Pearson, What Story Are You Living? So you don't have to dive deep. And by the way, Robert Johnson's book, some of his he, she, we are very short. Hollis I love, but it can be a deep swim. So if you're not used to it, you might be like, screw this. And even Falling Upward by Roar, for some people is too deep. But I will tell you this, any of this deep material, if something doesn't make sense, don't analyze it. Maybe I don't have the life experience yet. Whatever jumps out at you and grabs you or resonates with you, pause, journal about that. And it doesn't mean the answer will come right away, but what does that mean for me? What lesson is there for me? Why did this jump out to me? So Carol Pearson has a workbook, What Story Are You Living? And it has a questionnaire. And so it'll give you a little kind of generic look at the archetypes that are operating strongly in your life or the ones that aren't operating that well at all, and little descriptions of them. And you can kind of do a self-assessment and, just start doing these explorations.
Yeah. And so I want to thank you for covering that. I want to take it to more the, not quite as deep, but the application, right? So when people are hearing all this stuff, they're like, man, they're throwing a lot of stuff at me. Maybe it's somewhat familiar. Maybe it resonates. Maybe it's more like I need to listen back to that. But when we talk about Jung and Hollis in the second half of life, a super overview, because I just read some of this was, Jung's thing was like, up until age 40, you're kind of like, quote unquote, you could call that midlife. And that's terrifying for those. I just turned 40, but a lot of people live till 80. So like, let's get real. It might be midlife, but let's make the most of it. So it's that, the first 40 years is basically research. And then the second half is where you kind of take off and you do your thing.
So a real important thing here about the second half of life per Jung is it is not a biological thing. It may happen around 35 to 55.
Yes.
It may. And some of the current authors like Rohr, Bill Plotkins, Ken Wilber, they'll say only 15 to 20% of the population ever really accepts the invitation to the second half of life. So don't think it's an age thing. My message and awareness to cops is you're getting an invitation to the second half of life way sooner than a civilian.
Yeah.
Because you're immersed in the suffering of innocent people. You're constantly around life and death. You have to inflict violence on other human beings to protect the public. But there's consequences to that are the harsher realities of life that make you ask deeper questions. So what I see is cops and firefighters and veterans have an invitation to the second half of life much sooner than other people. And a lot of these Jungian authors will also talk about a child that has a terminal illness that's 14, but has been struggling for 8 years, not knowing when they're going to die. Could be deeper than a lot of 40 and 50-year-olds.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it's your life experiences that give you this, quote, invitation to the second half of life, where it's no longer building your bank account, building your resume, worried about living from the outside in, the external validation. It's more about who am I really and what's my deeper calling.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for making that clarification because, that is the thing. He talks, or even Hollis, right? You listed all these authors, but Hollis talks about a lot of people never make that recognition, right? And a lot of people will recognize a catalyst or like something will happen, right? And you guys both talked about that a little bit, where it's basically the quote unquote midlife crisis, and really relevant for cops, even if you're doing, everything quote unquote right. You feel balanced, you feel purposeful, you're not ignoring your family, on and on and on. But why it's so impactful for cops, and there's an increase in conversations about this, which the identity is so prevalent, so in some ways overwhelming, so dominant, that when you do hang up the badge at some point, whether you're 50 or 55, or whether you have to at 40, or whether something happens physically or you get terminated, like it can be an absolutely catastrophic, if it can be absolutely catastrophic anyway, but like how do you grow through that, and what mechanisms do you have in place? And if you are not attending to some of the things or the many things that you both have shared, then that's probably going to be absolutely terrifying and absolutely disrupting to your life. Thoughts on that?
Well, that's the what I call left a bang, right a bang. If our mental health in the police world is SISM, Mitchell model, debrief, psychoeducation on PTSD, addiction, suicide, and there's a lot of if you guys have been to some of these peer support wellness conferences, I've been hearing it for 25 years. It's the cop that didn't prepare for the job, that has something go sideways, then cheats on their third wife and gets a DUI and quits because it's too stressful, then goes to rehab or meditates or does a couple therapy sessions, then writes a book and goes around saying it's okay not to be okay. And when you're really effed up like me, reach out and ask for help. So that's kind of like somebody, if we had an athlete that, and we need that message. So I don't want to totally disparage it. But what if you're an athlete, since me and Anthony were college athletes, you didn't do your strength and conditioning in the summer. You show up for football camp, and because you didn't prepare, you pull your hamstring during the conditioning test. And you're like, you know what? College football and studying is too stressful for me. I'm going to enjoy being a college student. But then I'm going to write a book about how to be a better college athlete. And maybe I played at like a D3 school, but I want to go talk to Notre Dame and Florida State and tell those guys that, hey, man, I didn't do the summer strength conditioning and I pulled my hamstring and I quit. And then talking to dudes that are doing the strength and conditioning at a higher level. And if this is making sense, if all the people speaking are right of bang in law enforcement, this is what guys tell me. Matt, all of this mental health and wellness only means people that have severe PTSD, an addiction, or want to kill themselves. Because I put on outdoor retreats and surf therapy retreats, and I want people to go before PTSD, addiction, and suicidal ideation, because that's like waiting until you're 400 pounds out of shape with diabetes. I'm going to pay for Anthony to train you. I'm going to pay for a meal prep plan to be sent to your house. And guess what, brother or sister? It's going to be really hard to get back in shape when you let yourself go that far versus staying in shape a little bit along the way. I hope that analogy or metaphor sort of fits what we're talking about, even psychologically and emotionally.
For sure. I think that's the key to this ownership piece, is like recognizing those self-destructive behaviors that become, they start really small and then they become habitual. And then unless you have that stillness, you don't recognize it. And unless you're intending to look at all these other facets of your life and all these other roles and personas, little like quadrants, if you're not like just shoveling them all away, then you're going to face the music and you're going to recognize that. And that's the key to this ownership piece. Any thoughts on Anthony before I kind of want to go to talk about, go back to the second half of life, this idea that we got to recognize all these, these narratives limitations, which we've said a lot of them, right? But it's, even though we mention all these challenges, they're not things that we can't overcome and work through as first responders, as cops.
Yeah, just kind of keep going with some of the thoughts real quick. I won't take too long, but who am I without the badge? Who am I after the job? Regardless of how this job ends for me, I'm not going to be a cop at some point.
Yep.
Just like I'm not going to be a football player at some point, and I knew that when I started the game. Like, even if you go pro, it's only like your shelf life is short. So the same thing's true for us. And I know in 2020, when cops were getting fired and refusing to get vaccines and getting terminated, and it's coming into from the coast, like I personally, I had that conversation with myself where I'm like, all right, what am I willing to do to keep this job? whatever that is. And at a point I was like, this is only a way for me to make income. Now it's a cool calling and I agree with that, but it's still a job and I am still me regardless if I have this job or not. Right. And that is back to, talking about Viktor Frankl's work. Like, who am I? What can you not take from me? What can another person not take from me? Who am I at my essence? Who am I at my core? Standing here basically naked, in a concentration camp. Who is Viktor Frankl? Like, that was a question that I took away from that book, and I reapplied in 2020 to myself. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need this job. I know who I am without it, and who can I become aside from that, outside of this? And that's a question I don't think we ask very often as cops, because the role is so strong with with us as law enforcement officers. So yeah, so
Yeah,
working
let's
through
keep
that,
going on that. That's great
well,
because it's tied right into what I mentioned, right?
and I really think that like this should be a conversation new cops have when they're coming through the academy. What can you gain from this job so you can get out on the back end and have a new mission right away?
Mm.
And that's going to do a whole lot for like officer death after like 5 years after retirement. Like, that's the average. We're dead. Suicides, like all that. It's going to give you a new mission, a new purpose, and you're going to take all these cool skill sets that you learn on the job and you're going to apply it somewhere else and probably make more money.
Yeah.
So
Dude, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like, shout out to Jess from Next Shift. I feel like I'm shouting her out a lot, but it's meaningful, right? And then, Cop to Corporate, there's different pages and different groups. Sean Nestor locally, but talking about that, and that's where I encourage, and I've talked about this multiple times, but like, have a mission statement. Like, start jotting it down, write down some of your values. Anthony, you kind of mentioned that. Like, what am I willing to do to keep this job? AKA, what am I not willing to do? And I'm like, peace. Like, I don't want to say I did my time. Like, if people did a few years with utmost respect and like values, like, great. Like, we don't need everyone to be a cop forever. And certainly if it doesn't serve you and your family, you shouldn't. Right. But chapter 18 here, because I got in front of me, Living an Examined Life is one of James Hollis's books. But chapter 18 is honor the difference between job, duty, and calling. And I'll say that again. Honor the difference between job, duty, and calling. And we call law enforcement a calling so often. A lot of people do. And I know that to hear this difference or point out this difference could be really uncomfortable for some people. He does say some people are lucky enough to have them all rolled together, but you bring up all these critical points, which is one day you got to hang it up. Even if you're 65, right? Like, you did all these other things and you just kept going with it. At one point you got to hang it up. And so your life purpose cannot require you to be a cop. Like, your life purpose, your life meaning, your personal mission has to be more open. And then you might have a sub purpose, like, as long as I'm a cop, this is my mission. This is how I want to do the job. This is how I want to affect the people around me, which is why I love that kind of playing off what you said, Anthony, which is like, man, you got to find a new mission right away or have one on deck, which is maybe you can have that some tentacles, some ideas from your life purpose, your life mission.
Yeah, and I think that job, duty, and calling, like, those things can change and probably should change over time, or progress, and it's going to start very, I remember being, 20, 22, trying to figure out what is my job, duty, and calling, like, what is this all going to look like? And it's very superficial and very shallow. And then it kind of, it builds and grows and progresses. And it's like, man, like, what do you get when you get to the top of the mountain? Like, a lot of times with just basic goal settings, talk to athletes about this. Like, they break a world record, and then the next day they fall into a deep depression. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you do now? You attacked your goal, you got to your goal, you got to the top. Now what? So you have to continue to progress and adapt. And sometimes job, duty, and calling is going to change shape.
Yeah, and that's where Hollis says, like, yeah, that's external metrics of achievement. Right. And that, kind of coincides with this first and second half. Like, first half, yeah, it's all achievement. And how I read it was almost like you have no choice but to follow, like, this is what your parents told you, this is what society told you, this is what you're supposed to do. But at some point, you got to recognize, like, to quote unquote find success in a meaningful way has to be internal, right? That has to go, that's the depth, right? That's the call to going deeper and finding yourself. Like, what do you really want? What is the thing that lights you up? How do you want to interplay and affect people around you? Like, what is your role in the community? Not just a job, right? Because we probably all had some sort of job as like a 3 or 4 year, maybe like 5 or 7 year old, where your parents were like, yeah, that's not like a great, like, you can't be a baseball player, or like, you probably can't be a baseball player. But it's not about being a baseball player. It's like what lit you up about that thing, and then did you actually hold on to that and continue that on in your path? Like, was it performing? Was it the self perfection? What was the thing? And sometimes we just turn away and we never really capture that back or even realize what that was.
You guys are hitting on so much stuff. I got so many notes. If I can add a few
Please.
to try to wrap some of this together. So, like, bringing up Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning is beautiful because it does tie into the second half of life. It also ties into post-traumatic growth. So for those of you not familiar with the book, it was a Jewish psychiatrist in a Nazi prisoner of war camp. And what he realized was the people that lost hope and meaning died shortly thereafter. So if you can't continue to find meaning and purpose in suffering and in darkness, like often that's where the sarcasm, the bitterness, if being a cop's just completely a paycheck and you can't look at what's happening to you as a cop and turn it into the intention to learn lessons to make yourself a better human being, more empathetic, more compassion. It's not us against them. I've seen so much stuff that I feel like I want to build a bridge and a touch point to other human beings versus identify a divide. And I'm going to keep growing and learning beyond just being a police officer. You will, quote, die. In the prisoner of war camp, they literally died, but we know cops that love the job that eventually are the sarcastic, bitter guys who hate the job and end up divorced and die shortly after retirement, either drinking themselves to death or just not taking care of themselves. And if you're not there, if you're not, quote, older, or somebody is listening, because I know both of you have a good following, somebody's like, dude, I'm not there yet, all this deep stuff. I want to tell you this. The things you can do for an anchor for a performance level right now, whether that's cold plunge, sauna, calming down your physiology, look at an aura ring. I want to see what your daytime stress, what your sleep is, whether it's yoga, contemplative prayer, going to therapy or spiritual direction. Like, you can do things now that will increase your performance and build healthy habits with eating and nutrition and sleep hygiene, that when the storm hits, those things you did for performance enhancement are now your anchors. Because you do not want to get in a shooting and your wife wants to divorce you, and I'm going to learn to meditate. I'm going to start eating strict. I'm going to join a CrossFit gym. I'm going to start judo. Get your ass off the couch now before the rite of bang, the next crisis, and do something little to improve your life, because that will help you when the pain and the suffering comes that you might say right now it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and that's huge. Thank you, Matt. And go back to Matt's episode if you missed it, where he talks a lot about tracking and like hacking at your physiology, made kind of these measures so you can recognize the interplay between that and your mental health, and just real data. There's a lot of points where you talk about sleep, blood work, and I won't go into it now, but please look back at that episode right around 260, right? So chapter 13, and we'll kind of wrap on this idea. You just said it, Matt, right? Which is choose meaning. We've been talking about meaning, and it's choose meaning over happiness. And I would just posit that if you're chasing happiness, you won't have either, but choose meaning, focus. And I'm curious if you guys have this off the cuff, or you're willing to share. Like, it doesn't have to be verbatim, but like, what are the tenets that for your mission, right? Your purpose, like what words could you put to that for the listeners to kind of think about? Because you guys are both very accomplished, and that's in a traditional, on paper, professional aspect, but then also in trying to live large, right? Trying to choose the path towards enlargement, as Hollis says, because I just looked at the page over here. I didn't just quote that. But really just like pursuing this depth and finding more out about yourself and what you can do with your purpose.
Oh man, that's like such a like you just opened up another hour of conversation at least with that.
Yeah, the challenge is we're gonna keep it brief.
Yeah, I would say like continued work, man, and like you can. All right, so like a lot of stuff with like mental health and a lot of stuff that we kind of like wrap it up with autonomy and gratitude, right? So like Matt, what you listed out is a bunch of stuff that you're in control of, right? Your anchors are stuff that you're in control of. You are in charge of you. You are in control of you, right? And then you can take that, like, what am I in control of? My emotions, my actions, for me, my training, my nutrition, like those things I can control, right? And then you can use that to piece together your goals and your direction. And then being grateful in spite of all the bullshit. If you're chasing, like Eric, you nailed it, man. Like if you're chasing happiness, if you're chasing justice, if you're chasing fairness, like that is a path to nowhere. You know what I mean? Like that stuff, like personally, I don't think we're going to get on this plane, of existence. I don't think that as human beings on earth, we will not see that here. We might see it after we die somewhere, but if you're chasing it here, it's a losing battle. But if you're chasing meaning and you're chasing and you're grateful for the fact that you're here on this adventure, like you'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like something will happen good.
Yeah. I like that, man.
A lot of toxic positivity in the world of influencers that life is about happiness and pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've heard the first responders and veterans start sharing their story around hard things on these retreats, or if we go cold plunge and then walk on the beach, and then they immediately apologize. They start sharing their feelings. They apologize and say, I'm so sorry. I'm being a bitch, a pussy, a fag, gay, or weak. Like that is like what we're trained is if I'm not happy and things aren't working out, something is wrong with me. And if you study spirituality or orientations of psychology, and I hate studying it sometimes because my personal life has shown the greatest lessons do come from great love and great suffering. All of the things in my life that were out of my control, I didn't even make a mistake, and I would never wish upon anyone, are the things that have made me deeper and wiser, more empathetic, and more compassionate, and only in the rearview mirror. They are not fun to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And consider the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual workouts in life are the ones you don't choose. So I walk in the gym today and there's 400 pounds on the bar. And it's like, dude, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. And a lot of people will walk away. Are you going to say, I'm going to figure out how to move the bar an inch and I'm going to do a partial rep and I'm going to start working on benching this 400? And it's often uncomfortable feelings, sadness, anger, frustration, the unknown that we don't want to deal with. And we avoid either with things that are, we talked about, sometimes the alpha male does too much CrossFit and jujitsu and avoids it. Other things are the drinking, the drugs, porn, sleeping with people you shouldn't sleep with, overtime buying toys. It's going to be, leaning into the darkness, the pain and suffering that's going to make you a better person, even though you don't want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony.
I mean, I couldn't agree with that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate you guys, and what Matt just shared. It made me think of that Henry Ford quote. Something to the effect of like, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're correct. And that's that power of mindset, which is like just such a prevailing theme in this whole conversation. Mind, body, spirit. So, man, I appreciate you guys so much. Please, tell the folks where they can find you, reach out. What else you guys offer, that kind of thing. So let's kick it off with Anthony.
Yeah, best way is to hit me up on Instagram, honestly, which is Anthony_Heroic Industries. And if you just send me a message, I'm pretty receptive to almost all of them, as long as they are semi-respectful.
Semi-respectful. Cops can do semi-respectful, hopefully. And what is the main thing that you do? Just to recap that.
Physical health, mental health, and like everything that comes in with that and performance as it relates to, law enforcement, first responders, and anybody else that kind of identifies with that type of mold or mindset or whatever. So
yeah. Love it. All right, Matt.
My website is tacticalchaplain.com. Tacticalchaplain.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Matt Domyancic. Instagram, Thin Blue Line Spirituality. Thin Blue Line Spirituality. And the secondary one is The Tactical Chaplain. So reach out. Don't reach out on Facebook. I think I have it, but I never log on. But if you reach out on LinkedIn or on Instagram, or if you go to Tactical Chaplain and there's an email button somewhere there, I'll get it. And what I do is I facilitate outdoor recreation retreats for first responders and veterans. And that's a long story how I do it. And we do it before you have PTSD and addiction, surf therapy type retreats and workshops, jiu-jitsu peer support. And that's because a lot of cops, if we're going to say, we're going to talk about mental health and wellness, they're going to give you the double bird. So what I do, and this goes back to my training at Fairfax County, is I got all the SWAT, full-time SWAT and full-time jump out guys. We do more tactical shooting. We do more martial arts. I wasn't doing cold plunge back then, but now we integrate cold plunge breath work, and then I do like a 3-hour interactive talk on mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And I'll tell you what, it's these SWAT or young patrol guys. They come for the shooting and the fighting. And I start talking at first, it's arms crossed, F this BS. And then, they're like, oh, this is not about religiosity, and this is not about PTSD, addiction, and suicide in one ear, out the other. We're having authentic conversations like we did today. I hope that's in somewhat a practical manner. And then guys are like, man, this was the most important part of the training. So those are the kinds of things I do, is try to get some tactical training going and then talk about things that are the second half of life, essentially. Give some awareness around it and taking better care of our physiology to be more in touch with our thoughts and our feelings. And I know guys are going to say, I don't have feelings. Yeah, you do. And also be aware of patterns in your life that helped you survive and thrive when you were young, that later on are probably going to be the obstacle to further growth and your family of origin with your partners, your spouses, and your kids.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Thank you both so much for this deep dive. We went into the depth for sure.
Well, thanks, man.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.